done for. Everyone get out.
Greetings sailors, welcome back to World of Warships, and I've got a very special preview video for you today. As you may or may not have been aware, the Germans are coming! Yeah, I had to do it, sorry. Myself and a couple of other YouTubers slash streamers have been basically given a Tirpitz to play with as a preview of the Germans generally. I think just a preview of this specifically. It's a tier 8 premium battleship, and it's going to be the first tier 8 premium battleship. There are a couple of battleships, premium battleships in the game already, in the form of whichever the Japanese tier 4 one is. The Arkansas Beta, which of course was a reward for beta testers, and the Warspite, which you can't actually buy anymore, but probably will be available at some point in the future. I would be surprised if it would. The Tirpitz is, well, it's the sister ship of the Bismarck, and I think it's no great stretch of the imagination to posit that the Bismarck itself will be the regular tier 8 German battleship. What I'm going to do is I will run down the stats first off in comparison with the North Carolina and the Amagi, both the regular tier 8 battleships that are currently in the game, and that will give us some idea as well, I think, of what the Bismarck itself will be like, because I think the actual Bismarck, at least in theory, will be slightly better than this, because this of course is a premium. Although, having said it's a premium, being a premium doesn't necessarily always mean it's worse. I'm looking at you, Murmansk and Gremiashi. So we'll have a look at the stats now, and we'll start off with the obvious place, which is the guns. Now, it's got 4 turrets with 2 guns per turret, and that actually means it has the least firepower of all of the other, well, I say all of the other 2. The North Carolina's got 12 guns in, I think, 4 turrets, and the Amagi has got 10 guns in 5 turrets. So that means that if you lose one of your turrets, you're going to lose a fairly big chunk of your firepower, but not so much as in, say, the North Carolina. The guns are also the smallest of the 3. I don't know what they are in inches, I think it's 15, but it's a 380mm gun versus 406 for the North Carolina and 410 for the Amagi. That means, of course, smaller shells that do less damage, and they're actually, by a bit of a margin, the least damaging of the 3. They have 11,300 as their max damage. That's the Citadel hit with AP, basically, compared to 12.6k for the Amagi and 13.1k for the North Carolina, which doesn't actually have the biggest guns by caliber, but it has the most damage. HE damage, exactly the same, the least. I won't go over the fire chances and that kind of thing. The biggest advantage in terms of firepower over the other 2 is the turret turn rate. Now, the range is about comparable. It's actually just in the middle. I think North Carolina's got the best range. The dispersion is actually not bad considering the range, although the Amagi has for its range by far the best dispersion at 227 meters versus 276 on this, and it's only got what is it, 1 point something less kilometers range. So it's a little bit more accurate at the slightly longer ranges that it's got than the North Carolina is, but it's just going to hit less hard. But like I was saying, the one big advantage it has got is its turret turn time. It also fires a bit faster, but I've found in practice it's the turret turn time that has made the most difference to me. I will preface, I should have prefaced it all by saying, my highest tier battleships up till now have been tier 5. I have played both the New York and the Congo, but that was back on the closed beta test server. So I can't directly compare it other than the numbers to the 2 battleships I'm talking about, but hopefully that is enough. So it has slightly, as I said, slightly better rate of fire. It's got about a 26-second reload versus a 30-second reload. And the turret turn time, well, I'll give you the exact numbers. The North Carolina is the worst at 45 seconds for 180-degree turret turns. That's going from one side to the other, basically. The Amagi is only a little bit better at 41.9, so basically 42 seconds. And the Tirpitz here has 36 seconds. And you can actually also improve that even further with a module that I've added. I'll actually quickly show you which one. Where are we? I believe it was Not that one. Not that one. I was sure there was one of them, but apparently not. I think there is one that improves turret turn time. Ah, that was it. I was in discussion with Conway the other day. There is. It's main battery modification 3, and you don't get it. So that's something to be aware of. You only get main battery modifications 1 and 2. So that's, I think I went for the one that makes it more accurate. So ignore the thing about putting a module on for extra turn time. I was getting confused. It was extra reduced rudder shift time is the one I've actually put on. But anyway, but yeah, it's still noticeable. And it does make a big difference. It means that when you're manoeuvring hard, it's a lot easier to keep your guns pointed in the direction where you want them to be. And I've had multiple instances where I've been able to at least keep half my guns on or near the target while I'm turning the ship. The front or rear guns, whichever were kind of having to make the biggest turn, well, they're out of action for a while. But even still, having half your firepower available is a big improvement on having none. So that's the firepower. There's also, obviously, the secondary firepower, and I'll have a quick look at that. It isn't as badly off as the North Carolina, which has a mere 10 secondaries, with the biggest being a 127mm gun. This has actually got the biggest caliber secondaries of any of them. It's got 6 150mm guns with a range of 4.5 clicks, which is, I think, the same across the board. And the rest of them, as you can see, are 105mm guns, which I think is fairly standard. But they're not that many. There's only 14 in total, but the fact that some of them are 150mm means they're actually reasonably effective, and I've had a couple of low health destroyer kills using those. The Amagi has got way more than either. It's got 24 secondaries, so it is a little bit more spiky at those close ranges, but there's still, it's no slouch. 150mm guns as secondaries, that's some of the destroyers and cruisers you start off with have like 150mm guns, so that's not too bad at all. AA is next up, and I think this is a bit of a weakness of the Tirpitz alongside its not spectacular firepower. It has the least AA guns available to it of all 3 ships, and although the 105mm and the 37mm have 5 and 3 kilometers respectively, over half your guns are these 20mm flat guns, and they've only got 2.1 kilometer range, so they only open up when basically stuff is pretty much already on top of you. And I've had a fairly bad time generally with torpedo bombers and well, not so much bombers aren't so bad, but torpedo bombers especially. And if a carrier driver is doing manual drops, which a lot of them are in tier 8 battles, there's basically nothing you can do to either dodge the torpedoes in the water or else knock the planes out the sky. You really do need anti-aircraft support when a squadron of torpedo bombers is coming for you. And my best experience so far has been when I was in a platoon with RamJB and Conway, who, as you can see, both actually, their chat window is still down there. They were both in cruisers with good air coverage, and inevitably torpedo bombers came after me because, hey, it's a Tirpitz, it's a bit of a novelty. That has happened a couple of times, and they just got annihilated. My own guns in combination with the AA guns of the cruisers just absolutely minced them. So I would say if you're going to play this thing, you are probably going to need either a cruiser escort or somebody in a friendly carrier giving you an air squadron of fighters, because on your own your AA guns are not sufficient, and they are, like I said, by far the least numerous of all 3. I mean, the North Carolina gets 68 AA emplacements, the Amagi gets 56, and this only has, if I've done my sums right, 35. So that is definitely a problem, and I think I've had an okay time dodging ship-launched torpedoes, but in terms of carrier-based torpedoes, I mean, I know that's a problem anyway with people being able to do point-blank manual drops. It's a problem even in destroyers. But especially with a big broad-sided battleship, and you literally can't turn out the way, you can't turn and thread the needle through them or anything like that. It's like, well, okay, hello, 3 squadrons of torpedo bombers, I just guess I'll give you all my hit points now. It's not a lot of fun, let me tell you. In terms of speed and maneuverability, it's pretty decent. It's sort of in the middle. It is pretty fast. I mean, it's actually technically the fastest of the three, but only by half a knot over the Amagi. There's actually a bit of... it's not quite consistent. It's not like this is the most nimble generally. I mean, the rudder shift time is actually fairly uniform across the board. It's half a second higher than both the North Carolina and the Amagi at 20.9 seconds. It's not really significant. And I, as you may have noticed, I put on the module that, well, as I said, gives me less rudder shift time. So that has improved things a lot. But the turn circle is only just under the Amagi's, and actually it's the North Carolina that's got the tightest turn circle, but that might be because it's got the lowest overall speed. So maybe it's a good thing that this doesn't have a turn circle that's quite as bad as the Amagi's, but 850 meters versus 870, it's not much of a difference. So it's not the most nimble battleship, but it's still fast enough for, if you've got your head on a swivel and you're paying attention, it's still fast enough for actually dodging out of the way of torpedoes that have been launched at you at range. Lastly, concealment, and this is a bit odd indeed. It actually, in terms of surface detection range, it is smack bang in the middle. The North Carolina is 15.7 clicks, this is 16.4, and the Amagi is 17.3. However, it has the worst air detection range of the three. The North Carolina's got 12.6, the Amagi's got 13.7, and this has got 14.8. I have no idea why that is. It doesn't fit the pattern at all, but there it is. You're going to get spotted from the air much more readily than the other battleships. And again, I will quickly flick back to modules. With the final slot, I actually went with the Concealment System Modification 1, which gives minus 10% to detectability, because the other thing, which is the Target Acquisition System, which gives you 20% acquisition range, and it's not view range, it is effectively extra render range. That isn't much use when I've already got just over 20 kilometers with my my effective render range anyway. So yeah, that's the one I went for. I think if you buy a Tirpitz, that's the one you should put on as well, because the extra render range is just not needed at all. And lastly, we come to the thing that makes this special. Torpedoes. Yes, this is a battleship with torpedoes. It has 2 quad launchers on each side of the ship. Now, they are very fragile. I've had them knocked out quite often, and they only have a 6-kilometer range, so they're a bit of a novelty. The only times I've successfully used these have been once on a destroyer that was trying to catch up to me, didn't know I had torpedoes, and I was able to drop some in the water as a nice little surprise. Boom. The only other 2 times I can think of have been both at extreme close range against enemy battleships, and one time it was when somebody was doing that incredibly annoying thing where they were half in the map border, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to drive up to you and I'm going to put a bunch of torpedoes in your side and see how you like that. That particular exploit, by the way, is being taken out in the next patch, much to everybody's relief. I don't know exactly what they're going to do, whether you just run aground on the map border, or whether it just brings you to a dead halt, or whether you can now just get shot in the portions of your ship that are beyond the map border. But regardless, they've said they're fixing it, so that's pretty good for me. So these are 533mm torpedoes, whatever that is in inches. They're roughly equivalent. I mean, 6 kilometers range is nothing, but 64 knots is not bad. 13.7k damage is about equivalent to a tier 5 or 6 destroyer or cruiser, just about. I mean, it varies a bit, but it's not bad. If you get a broadside of all 4 torpedoes into somebody, unless they're, like, if it's another tier 8 battleship, you're not going to knock them out of the water totally with that, but you're going to do a significant amount of damage, enough to finish them off with your guns and secondaries, no problem. So, like I said, they're a bit of a novelty, but when you do get to use them, they're pretty damn useful indeed. And you're going to have the advantage of, when this thing comes out, which is going to be pretty soon after you watching this video, nobody, well, hardly anybody, is going to know that you've got these. The vast majority of players don't tend to watch things like YouTube, they don't tend to look up guides, they don't tend to look up specifications. So, at first, you're going to be able to surprise a lot of people with those torpedoes at close range, but I suspect further down the line, when the Tirpitz becomes much more established in people's consciousnesses, that people are going to be very wary of getting within close range. And I will say the torpedo arc as well, you can't see it here, but it covers a pretty good range. I mean, it's not one of these really narrow arcs, which would be, on something that turns relatively slowly like a battleship, it would be pretty useless. It's basically a kind of a destroyer firing arc. So there's about a 40 to 45 kind of dead zone fore and aft, and everything else is fair game. So you don't have to turn your ship that far to get off torpedoes at somebody. So yes, I have found them useful, but a few times. But those times where they were useful, they were extremely so. So, enough blathering. I am going to get on to some actual gameplay now. There won't be any complete matches because I honestly didn't have any that were really spectacular from start to finish. There were some that were okay, but honestly I struggled to do any significant amount of damage with this thing. So bear that in mind, and also bear in mind that the problems I have with battleships generally all still apply to this as well. So, I may have told a slight inadvertent fib in that actually I did end up having a really good game. It was just after I'd recorded that garage segment, or well, port segment really. So in total I think I've played about 45 games in the Tirpitz, or the Tirpitz, as I'm sure it will invariably become popularly known. And you're going to see some highlights first of times when I did get to use the torpedoes, and it was, out of those 45 or so games, only maybe 5 or 6 of them. I was slightly misremembering when I said it was only like 3. And actually, as I say misremembering, again, 1 or 2 occasions were actually after I had recorded that garage segment. So anyway, so that is Zumo. I released them a little bit early, but I didn't want to get too close to him. I mean, I could have gone up to point blank range, but there you go. That was a big chunk of damage right there. Not enough to kill him, unfortunately. We went on to lose this battle, but it's just one of those scenarios when you're at close quarters combat with an enemy battleship particularly, and it just becomes very useful. And this is exactly the same thing. This is the counterpart. This is the North Carolina, and again, we're moving to very close range. And I'm going to be able to just put out a spread of torpedoes against him. Now, I will say the torpedo launchers, I mean, most of the time it doesn't matter, but they are fragile, and there have been occasions, just a couple of them, when it seemed like actually now would be a good time to put torpedoes out, but oh wait, my launchers got destroyed. And because you've only got 1 per side, and I realise I actually, in the port segment, I said, oh, you get 2 quad launchers per side, and it made it sound like you get 2 per side. No, I meant you've got 1, 2 on the ship, but 1 per side. But the fact that they're quad launchers means that they still pack quite a punch. Anyway, this guy was trying to evade a bit, but as you can see, yes, another tasty bit of damage. It significantly took his health off, and actually, I don't know if he's flooding, and that does reduce his speed, or if he just had his propulsion knocked out or something. Although you would actually be able to tell that, I think. But I launched the second spread. However, it's not going to matter because I'm actually going to be able to get in with the main batteries just before the torpedoes get there. That game, unfortunately, was a draw because the enemy carriers just ran away and we ran out of time. And we weren't able to catch up enough on points. But hey, that's how this game goes sometimes. Third clip. This is the one I mentioned where there was a destroyer chasing me. And as you can see, this match was going very badly indeed. There are an awful lot of ships shooting at me right now. There is, as I've said, a destroyer somewhere behind me, and that first spread that I launched isn't going to be the one. I'm perilously low health. I'm trying to keep range. I'm hoping that they cap out, but somebody, I think it was one of our cruisers that are left alive. It'll be the further away one, the Atlanta. I think he managed to actually decap, and that's going to mean my death. However, and you'll actually get to see here as well the turret turn rate in action. You'll get to see the rudder shift in action with that minus 20%, which I found to be particularly useful. I think that one is going to be fairly essential equipment on this particular ship. But there's the second spread out, and he is, as you can see, not actually within range yet. And I thought, okay, these are probably not going to do anything. But I suspect this is maybe a player who wasn't aware I had torpedoes, and so therefore it's going to come as a bit of a surprise to him. And you can see he's only just about to go into range, but it kind of looks like my torps are going to run out of range, so yeah, I was not hopeful. And then, lo and behold, because he's a destroyer, Yes, it only took one. So unfortunately that game ended with my death, but anyway. Last of the shorter clips, there is a kind of a longer bit coming up as well, is this particular game, and I'm actually squadded up with another Tirpitz, and the full bit of gameplay you're going to see is also me squadded up with this guy, Strangers123, in another Tirpitz. There's also a circling there, KK1604 in a Lexington. And, well, this particular clip is going to be a bit educational. Also, I apologise if the frame rate is a bit naff in places. On this particular map, the frame rate is just... I don't know. It is not consistent or smooth at all. And I've looked at multiple replays for this map, and it's just always the same. The frame rate is always terrible. Anyway, the Megami behind me, and this is a regular tier 8 cruiser. That's not the premium one, the Otago. He has just waited until he was exactly behind me and then launched a spread of torpedoes. Now, I've got my own torpedoes off, but that 13,000 health or so that he just took off me, that is going to be my undoing. I probably would have died regardless, but I would have been able to stay alive a lot longer if I'd had that extra 13,000 health, if I'd had my repair ability available. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm more in danger from him than the other guy. So, unfortunately, I do die here, and like I said, I probably would have died anyway with the range of ships shooting at me. But that guy really didn't help, and that's the kind of thing you expect in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 battle. But in a Tier 8 battle, when somebody had to grind to get that cruiser? No, there's no excuse for that. That was a moment of supreme stupidity on that guy's part. So lastly, this is, I don't know, a half replay, a bit of a longer section here. This is me, and I will say I mostly had very good matchmaking, and that had possibly helped my impression of this ship. I didn't really see that many tier 10s, and not even that many tier 9s, so I was able a lot of the time to be reasonably aggressive. There were still plenty of other tier 8s around though. But in this particular instance, I decided I would maybe put the armour a bit to the test, see how aggressive I could be. And it looked like we needed to push this flank and take out these ships anyway. And actually, on the subject of armour, that's one of the things that you can't directly see in the game. You don't know... They don't tell you how much armour they've given you. And I know in real life the Tirpitz and the Bismarck had belt armour of, I think, 380mm. And it was actually... the armour protection scheme was fairly extensive. And I will say, it seems to be pretty hard to get a Citadel hit on the Tirpitz. I didn't really have that experience too many times. The Citadel seems to be rather difficult to hit. But the armour, considering that the Tirpitz and the Bismarck were known for having good armour, though that was kind of an inherent part of the design, the armour doesn't seem that effective. It's still fairly good against, I think, cruisers more than battleships, but I didn't have the experience of having that many bounces against particularly other battleships. And maybe that's just fair enough, because another hidden thing that World of Warships does not tell you is penetration characteristics of your shells. So, I don't know, maybe I've been facing ships with particularly high penetration characteristics. These are all things that Wargaming has, in their infinite wisdom, decided to keep hidden, and I don't know why, but anyway. This, it feels like, and this is just gonna have to be what it is, it feels like the pen on the AP for the Tirpitz's guns is pretty decent. But equally, it feels like the armour is not that effective. I mean, it's okay. It's definitely not made of paper. I'm not getting constant citadels, as I've said. But it doesn't feel like it is an armoured fortress, especially. Another thing I forgot to mention in the port, which I've just remembered, hit points. This has got, as you can see, 69,300 hit points. It's actually got more hit points than either the Amagi or the North Carolina. And there we go, that's the torpedo spread. This is the guy that was hugging the map border, and that made him particularly easy to hit with my torpedoes, as you can see. But this actually has 3,000 more hit points than either of the other tier 8s, and 3,000, not a huge amount, but it's enough to take another couple of hits. And I think with the armor it's got, and there you go, my torpedo's knocked out. The armor that it's got, the extra, I mean, extra health is never a bad thing. But it's not like it's an extra 10,000. It's not like you can go totally gung-ho. Anyway, this was the good bit of this. I mean, I'm going to get to kill this Pensacola, who really doesn't have any armor at all. And now that his battleship support is has been pared away, he is basically, he's trying to make a run for it. But yeah, he's got, what, 3 ships firing their guns at him now. So he really is a bit screwed. And this is a situation where the extra rate of fire actually, and the turret traverse as well, but particularly the rate of fire came in very useful when facing our cruiser.
Enemy cruiser destroyed.
And especially in the lower tier battleships, I found that frequently the rate of fire was just kind of cripplingly bad. But just that extra bit of firepower, not firepower, but the ability to get more shots out in a minute, frequently very useful. Anyway, inevitably, torpedo bombers. Now, I was off on my own. I should have gone back towards the friendly Amagi. That was my bad, but even so, all the same, absolutely. I don't know why I slowed down. I thought maybe if I could slow down and turn in, but he was doing manual torque drops. It was inevitable either way. And yeah, if I'd had air cover from the carrier, maybe, but the carrier's planes were all in the north, and as I said, there were no ships nearby, so anyway. But we won that one, and as you can see, and I haven't talked about profitability yet, but that was a pretty nice result, even though it was disappointing that I got knocked out at that point. And a big chunk of my damage in that one did come from those torpedoes. 4 hits, 37,000 damage. And that was almost as much as my AP damage in that one. And there's some score screens for you, or result screens. That was enough for, despite my ship getting knocked out of the water, over 300k profit. So as a premium ship, I will say, it seems to make a pretty good amount of money. And you have to be having a pretty terrible game. If you get knocked out, I mean, the full repair costs are like, was it 78k? Even in a terrible game, I'm making 100k, so I've never lost money with it yet. Of course, that said, that's with a premium account, you know, bear that in mind. But yeah, even in a sort of below average game, it's like 150 to 200k, and it's a good money maker, and that's what you want out of a premium ship. But I suppose up until now, I've been talking about it more as how is it as a ship, but let's also remember that this is a premium. And one thing to know, and I didn't actually know this until relatively recently, you can put ships of any class from an individual nation into a premium ship. There is no class restriction as there is in World of Tanks. I just assumed that there was, but there isn't, so it's worth knowing. So I can put the same captain, for instance, in my Murmansk that I use in my Gremiashi, even though one's a destroyer and one's a cruiser. There's no penalty for doing that. The only downside is, of course, that if you've got a battleship captain, you've been prioritizing battleship skills. And so if you put a cruiser captain in a premium battleship, he might not have all the skills you want. So that's a thing you have to bear in mind. There's still that particular bit of class distinction. Not all skills are equally useful on all kinds of ships. So yes, you can use them to train up your captains from other classes of ship, but you might be hindering your performance in the actual ship itself, because having like if you put just to give an example, a carrier captain in this, and he's got the rank 1 skill of aircraft rear gunners, for instance, that's not going to be much use in a battleship. Anyway, this is a big cluster of friendlies. There's Strangers123 again, also in a Tirpitz, and you might be wondering how he has a Tirpitz. He's actually a super tester. I actually know him from my SGTA days. He actually knows a bunch of the other super testers, well, obviously he does, and a number of them are actually also World of Warships streamers, names you probably would be very familiar with indeed, if you are particularly into the World of Warships community. So this was just a standard match, and again we're with KK in the Lexington, although the matchmaking, as you can see here, one of the things that's changing with the next patch is that carrier matchmaking is going to be a lot tighter. At the moment it seems to make little distinction between carriers and battleships in terms of them being capital ships, and platooning up can kind of throw the matchmaking for a loop for a bit. So we actually ended up, I can't remember what the enemy carriers were, I can't tell just from the silhouettes alone, but it's 2 versus 1 basically. And from the next patch onwards, it's always going to be a lot stricter. It's always going to be a carrier of the same tier, and the platooning rules ought to not affect that in the same way that they currently do. So this is, that's a rather suicidal looking Sims there. This initial deployment is looking a little heavy on this side of the map. And I actually decided at this point to, there we go, to turn back and help with the other side. And I'm actually a bit more confident in doing that in this scenario because I have the carrier player on my platoon, and I'm guaranteed of at least some air cover from him. And there's also a friendly, I think that's the Atlanta slightly to my south, that's going back that way as well. So again, air support, air cover is incredibly important. I think just battleships, when you're playing battleships generally, but in this one in particular, because anti-aircraft capability is one of its weaker areas. So as you can see, look who's coming for me. One of the enemy carriers has sent his planes after me. I did have that experience a fair amount, and I think a little bit of it was, hey look, it's a Tirpitz. But there was also, to be fair, I don't think it was always that. I think a lot of it was just, it's a top tier battleship and therefore it's the priority target. So yeah, so there we go. There's KK's planes making fairly short work of those enemy squadrons coming for me. And at this point I probably could have popped off my own spotter plane to help out, but it doesn't actually matter in that scenario. I keep forgetting that I've got the spotter plane, and you'll see I don't actually use it in this battle until relatively late. But for now it doesn't really matter, there's plenty of stuff in range. So the rate of fire on this is pretty good. I think the shell speed on this is actually pretty good because, obviously, I'm going to repeat myself here, I haven't played the other 2 battleships, I've only played the tier 5s. But at the ranges you're fighting, you only have to really give lots of leads to faster targets at longer ranges. And if you're firing against other battleships, I generally, this was towards the end of, this was after I'd recorded the port segment, this particular battle. And this was at the tail end of those 40 odd battles that I've played, so my aim is a lot better than it was when I started. But the shell velocity is, yeah, it's nice, and it means you don't have to give that much lead, and that's often quite useful. Although you do sometimes get other players that, even at these tiers, they will play around with their speed, and oh, there's a nice citadel here there, to throw off enemy shots. And at longer ranges, I think that is still, even at the higher tiers, maybe even a more viable strategy if you've got maximum range shots flying around, because you've got more time to put the pedal to the metal. Pedal to the metal? Pedal to the metal. I know what I mean. But I think that probably is a more sensible strategy in something like a cruiser or a destroyer when you've got better acceleration characteristics to work with. Although I have to say the acceleration also on this, not half bad. So we've scared off that Amagi. Again, I have an air squadron coming in to try and attack me, and I'm now going to be more relying on the Atlanta's air defences and my own. Unfortunately, the Atlanta player was actually paying attention, and you'll see he's actually changing course back towards me now that these aircraft squadrons are coming in, and that makes a hell of a lot of a difference when you've got a cruiser who's actually paying attention and trying to support you when you've got air squadrons coming in. And this guy wasn't even, this is just a random player, and it was always nice to see people kind of on top of what their class is supposed to be doing. Oh, and that's a double citadel and not a target. Yeah, he's got to be feeling that. So, between myself and the Atlanta's firepower, I mean, I did get a double fire from that bomber squadron. I think it was from that bomber squadron. But the torpedo squadron is, with the Atlanta's help, having a great deal more difficulty actually getting the correct approach vector, and they're having to fly around over us, and that means they're getting just rapidly whittled away. I think he actually does try and drop on the Atlanta. Or, no, okay, he's trying to drop on me. One torpedo, though, I mean, that's not so bad in the scheme of things. I don't even flood. And there's another hidden thing I could talk about, which I don't really know the ins and outs of, but yeah, the torpedo bulges. A lot of battleships of this era had basically specific anti-torpedo armour, and the actual... Well, I've read more about the Bismarck than the Tirpitz. It's easier to find information on the Bismarck than the Tirpitz, but it seems like it had smaller bulges than its contemporaries, and possibly that means it's more vulnerable to torpedo damage and to flooding damage. Being hit by a torpedo, even a plane-launched torpedo, and not flooding, that is a rarity, and that's probably a rarity in most classes of ships, though, to be fair. But as I say, I don't know how it directly compares. Only Wargaming specifically knows that. So that Otago really backed off, trying to keep his distance because he's pretty low health, less than 1,000 in fact. And I finally remembered, oh yeah, I've got a spotter plane. That might help. So I get my forward guns on him, and there we go. Nice. So we've basically secured this end of the map. Strangers, on the meantime, has been trying to push around the north end, but for some reason, our other battleship platoon decided to come back here as well, and it really wasn't necessary. It does turn out to be kind of useful later on, but looking at the situation now, they'd have been much better off sticking with strangers, and it's kind of, he's now basically alone up there. He's got air support from KK still, but in terms of actual firepower, well, he is the sole recipient of the attention of about 3 different enemy ships. And unfortunately, he isn't going to survive this battle. So there's that Atlanta. I know I don't have to worry about torpedoes from him because he's an American high-tier cruiser. And I've always kept the rule of thumb that I've never tried to drop torpedoes on a Japanese cruiser, because if I was at that range, they'd be dropping torpedoes at me as well. Although it depends on the cruiser, because some of the higher tier ones, and I don't know which ones specifically, which probably would be very useful, but some of them have their torpedo launchers mounted in the rear. So depending on the direction, you could still potentially safely approach them. But with the way that most cruisers are able to turn, there's every chance they could still manage to get round and pop off torpedoes at you. So now myself and the Atlanta are engaging this Ioba, and he is now alone. It's 2 versus 1. It's the volume of fire from the Atlanta with my heavy hitting firepower, so he probably doesn't stand much of a chance, because the rest of the enemy team are now all in the north and doing their best to take down strangers, who is still gamely fighting on. He does actually have a pretty good result at the end of this battle. And you can see here, even at full turn, my rear turrets are easily keeping up with my turn. And that alone makes me like this more than other battleships I have played. You don't feel crippled when you're having to maneuver in anything like the same way. And yes, the front turrets will take a little while to come round, but it almost means that, and there have been occasions when I've been able to utilise this quite effectively, and whoops, you ran aground there, mate, I don't think you wanted to do that, where I've been able to keep the front and rear groups of turrets firing at different targets whilst making a turn. And that actually can be very, very useful sometimes. So I've killed my speed a bit to get the turn in a bit tighter, and as you can see, my front turret's creeping around there. Well, not even creeping, they're actually turning relatively quickly for battleship turrets. But if we can just finish this guy off, then we really do have to head north and either try and cap or blow up the rest of the enemy team, because we're reasonably even on numbers. Now, Strangers has died, and KK has a Farragut, I think it was a Farragut, creeping up on him. And I think the secondaries in the Lexington are actually pretty good, but unfortunately he manages to, he showed his wrong side or something like that, and ended up not being able to take out the Farragut in time. So we're going to lose KK very shortly as well. But given that the enemy carriers by this point have lost most, if not all, of their air wings, it doesn't matter. KK did a really good job in this one of actually clearing out the skies. Despite there being 2 enemy carriers, I think they were both lower tier. I think that was how the matchmaker had done it. They were both tier 6 or tier 7, something like that. Or one was a tier 6 and one was a tier 7, I don't know. But anyway, Ioba making just a getaway with just the remainder of his health, and he concentrated entirely on that Atlanta and was able to take him down. And he might be a problem, because if he pops up and fires torpedoes at me, that might be nasty. Meanwhile, the Colorados have just been slowly chugging away along the eye line. And they're now here, but there's nothing to do. So I think they should have gone north. But as I said, their being here, their extra guns being here, does end up being at least a little bit useful. So the destroyer, I mean, KK went down, but he took the destroyer with him. And I'm actually going to, and they're probably not going to hit, but I might as well, fire off a volley of torps, because if that Ioba peeks out from that corner, it's kind of just about in range. Now, as you can see, that enemy Amagi, super low health. And, oh, hello. Yep, I'm going to take at least one of those, but as you can see, I managed to dodge the other 2, so with the health I had left, it's not too bad. But, yeah, generally speaking, I found, and that's a perfect example, dodging ship-launched torpedoes in this thing was not too bad at all. So I don't really have any complaints on that score. The only time I really badly suffered from destroyer and cruiser torpedoes was when I was not paying attention. And there was one particular game on the ice map where somebody set up a really nice ambush for me, and I couldn't complain about it because it was, I didn't know he was there. I went round a corner and boom, full broadsides of torpedoes wrecked me so badly, and it was a beautiful setup, it really was. So anyway, I know the Oba's still kind of peeking out that, and oh hello, there's one of the carriers. The Amagi to the north, super low health. We don't know where the remaining, the other battleship is. I think it was a Congo, I'm not sure. But the Oba is, well, that's the front of his ship, and I don't think he can get torps out from the front and sides. So that's one less. We are running out of time now, though. We're down to 3 minutes. And I was slightly worried that this might be a draw, but lo and behold, there's the other carrier. They're both on this side of the map. So I'm completing the turn. I'm going to get my guns, I'm going to get a full volley on that Ranger. So that is the tier 7, so it must have been like a tier 7 and a tier 6. And as you can see, I'm waiting for both turrets to come round, but one of them doesn't quite make it, so I think I only get, and there's only one hit in. There we go, 3 hits. I spoke too soon. But I'm wanting to take out this Ryujo here, and I really didn't need to, because the Colorados are both there. And as Strangers was reminding me on TeamSpeak, we're rapidly running out of time at this point. This could be a draw. And in fact, if we don't kill them at this point, it will be a draw. We can't get to the enemy cap in time. But, well, it's not going to turn out that way. So I spot a plane in the air. Once again, I remember that I have a spotter plane to actually use. The Ranger, I'm not sure if he was maybe trying to ram, but the Amagi actually is also coming in this direction-ish. And there's the Congo. So at this point, I have to give full credit to the enemy team for not just running up to the north of the map and making it a draw, because that is an all too frequent occurrence. They must have known that myself and the Colorados were still fairly high health, but instead of just running away, they actually decided they were going to try and fight it out to the last. So full credit to them. Basically, the result of this battle, I mean, it would have been a decent result damage-wise anyway, but if the enemy team hadn't decided to come to us, as I've said, it would have been a draw. So at this point, the rapid rate of fire comes in very useful. In any other battleship, I would have struggled to get off potentially enough shots and to get my turrets round in time. Now, I just need one successful hit on that Amagi. Unless I get a super low spalling hit, but The Congo, on the other hand, there we go. That's actually a Citadel hit for, and he was like 600 health left. Yeah, that was an unnecessary Citadel, but whatever, I'll take it. And my thought was, oh, I'll get closer and I'll finish the Congo off with some torpedoes. And the Ranger, meanwhile, the Colorados did take him out. So it was one less set of shots I had to take against that guy. So it was of minor use that they were there. But I get a nice penning hit there, and there we go. Finish off that Congo. So that was 42 hits. I got a couple of air kills there, but most of the air kills were gotten by KK. 5 killed and 4 Citadels, and over 500,000 credits awarded in that one, with over 3,000 XP. So that was, when you take the base XP, actually 2,200, not bad. KK there with 2,100, and Strangers with just over 2,000. So it was a nice 1, 2, 3, what's the word I'm looking for? Podium finish. And it was nearly 100,000 damage, and that's the best result I have had to date in the Tirpitz, in the 40-odd battles I've played in it. So not a single bit of torpedo damage in that one at all. That was all about the AP damage, and unfortunately I didn't take a screenshot of the final bit of the results screen, which tells you your profit, but it was easily over 400k profit in that battle. So yes. Conclusions, final thoughts. As I've said, I am not, as they are currently in the game, a big fan of the battleship playstyle, but I actually have found myself liking the Tirpitz. As to whether it will be worth the money, it depends what they do with... if they just sell it as a regular tier 8 premium, and it's going to be, in that case, maybe 40 euros, it's still the price of a full game. You know, microtransactions in wargaming products are usually anything but for what it is, for the amount of money it makes, for how it plays, I would say as a regular tier 8 premium, if you enjoy battleships, even if you don't especially enjoy battleships, even if you're more into cruisers and destroyers, it isn't crippled by the slow turret traverse, it isn't crippled by the quite the same by the low rate of fire that its contemporaries are. But if they sell it in one of these big kind of 80, 90 euro packages where they dump in a bunch of other stuff as well too, you know, they're giving you more stuff, but it's not necessarily stuff you want. Maybe if you just want the ship, it's not going to be then worth the price. And at that point, it really is up to you. But as a ship, it's kind of fun to play. And I like the rate of fire, I like the turret traverse. With the additional equipment I've put on it, it turns very well. I don't have to worry about ship-launched torpedoes that much as long as I'm paying attention. And generally speaking, as a non-battleship driver, I did enjoy it as a ship. I think it is a pretty good, pretty well-balanced machine. And the fact that it gets torpedoes as well, the novelty value of that alone on a battleship is going to be enough for some people. But as I've said previously, as time goes on, people are going to be more and more aware that it does have torpedoes, and so therefore you'll be probably a bit less likely to be able to use them. But novelty value aside, they do come in handy sometimes. So there we go, the Tirpitz, and I may well get one myself depending on what they are asking for it. If it's going to be like a 90 euro package, then no, probably not. But if it's just a regular tier 8 premium price, then yes, I probably will. I think it is worth that money in the terms of, you know, what World of Warships does and what wargaming does. So if you have enjoyed this sneaky preview of the Tirpitz, you can leave any comments below. You can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.